Good evening, everybody. This is the Hillbilly Think Tank, and I am Spencer Keck, coming at you live from Hardin County in Tunnel Hills, where we know that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is what makes all of this worthwhile. Y'all, you've seen the headlines. Hardin County schools are going to be cutting free lunches for the kids in the schools. Now, to some, this may sound controversial, not to me. And hopefully, I'll have my guest will be able to log on here in a minute. That is Colonel Owens, who is also currently in the City Council of Radcliffe. She's also running for mayor in Radcliffe. I expect her on at any moment. She's just getting back, and it looks like here she is. All right, we're just talking about you there, Colonel.
What's going on?
Well, unfortunately, we know what's going on.
Well, we do.
And, yeah. So just giving everybody a little heads up before we have a little interlude and, introduce what we're going into. All right.
Okay.
So, our title tonight, y'all, here at the Hillbilly Think Tank, where I am the educated hillbilly. No, that's not an oxymoron. There have been educated, erudite, and emancipated hillbillies ever since my kinfolk came through the Cumberland Gap with Daniel Boone, Squire Boone, and the Long Hunter Freeman. So, when we came through that Cumberland Gap, we came because we were trying to escape the oppression, honestly, of the folks who were setting up the same type of system on the East Coast as we were trying to leave in England. So we're here tonight to talk about some of the same things still going around and around. They're taking free lunch from kids here in Hardin County schools. What's really happening in the Hardin County schools is what we're here to talk about. So I've got as my guest, as I was saying earlier, here she is. We've got Colonel Terry Owens. She's also Radcliffe City Councilwoman, and she is running for mayor. Is that correct?
Correct.
Am I getting it right? All right. For Radcliffe. Y'all, let me just give us a little intro tune to honor both the Colonel, my dad, who, as I talked about last night, passed away from Agent Orange in Lexington, Kentucky, some years back. I know he'd be proud of me if he was here today. And my little brother, who would have been 52 last month if my dad hadn't found him hanging in the closet 4.5, almost 5 years after he lost his leg and hand in Afghanistan with the Big Red One. So since we got two vets on here tonight, thought we'd kind of start the show with something to honor some great vets. So. Now, Colonel, does that look like it is nearby, or does that look like out Virginia way?
That looks more like Virginia. Is that Stonewall Jackson or
Kind of reminds me
I
of
can't
that
tell. Is that
setting, right?
Yorktown?
Yeah, that's what I was, kind of reminded of myself. My dad was with the Ia Drang in that
Hmm.
battle, in Vietnam. He was actually on the helo that went in and rescued the lost platoon. So every time I hear Gary Owen, I think of him. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. But
Hmm.
yeah. So and he had a soft spot in his heart for the kids of Kentucky who wasn't as fortunate,
Hmm.
and that's what we're here to talk about tonight. So you were the one who really, along with some of the magistrate candidates, who really brought this to my attention. And I am a school teacher.
Hmm.
I taught for 2 years at North Hardin High School,
Right.
and I transferred from North Hardin, and I
Hmm.
now teach at JCPS. That way, I don't have a conflict of interest, as
Right.
I run for office, since I'm running for a magistrate here in District 3. But you brought up the fact that, hey, this is happening, and I just was thinking, man, can you imagine sending your kid to school and for the first time in years, you get a bill for their lunch? Not because your income changed and not because your kid did anything wrong at all, but
Hmm.
because the federal government changed the rules.
Hmm.
And that's the reality, of course, that's facing some families right now in Hardin County, Kentucky.
It
So
is.
today we're breaking down exactly what's happening with free school meals, what the community eligibility provision is, called CEP for short
Hmm.
by some, and why some Hardin County schools may lose their eligibility, what it means for real kids sitting in real cafeterias. And I've got someone that knows this community inside and out, and that's you, Colonel Terry Owens. Like I said, you're Radcliffe City Councilwoman. Welcome
Yeah.
to the show.
Thank you so much. I like that intro. Short and sweet, but impactful.
So,
So what?
before we, let's start with some of the background of how we got here, right?
Okay.
Um, Before we get into what's changing, let's give people some how do we even get here moment. Where did
Mhm.
universal free school lunches come from to begin with?
Well, if you go back to, as we said, the start, that pandemic era, or as we say, pre COVID or leading up to COVID, because kids were already out of school and wanted to make sure at the onset that there were meals, right? I mean, you have Meals on Wheels, and here we have Feeding America, things like that. And say in Louisville, they have Dare to Care and they have their kind of Meals on Wheels thing. But when we went out of that routine, it was like, how do we cover that gap? And so free lunches had to continue to stay as a relief for families until we got to what you consider the end of COVID or post COVID. And then, of course, transition back to that income based eligibility system. And I think people sort of got, not, I wouldn't say comfortable. Comfortable is a bad thing. It just became a
Yeah.
routine for that year or so. It's kind of like the out of school or their alternative way of learning. And the alternative, if you do it long enough, it becomes normal. So right now, families here in Hardin County, which I believe is the sixth largest county by landmass and by population, where we're in this pandemic era policy. Um, as you see, it wasn't a luxury. It wasn't supposed to be lifetime. So now it's ended. And that's very similar to a lot of the programs that started post World War One. I know I'm going off script, but post World War One
Sure.
and of course Vietnam. It's like you take people out of their community. They were the breadwinners, the traditional family, and now the spouse, typically a female, has to go in and fill in those gaps. And then now kids are kind of taking care of themselves. So of course the male comes back and there may not be a job. We're post industry kind of thing, and we have a lot of international policies for trade, and we had NAFTA and all these other things. And so the job market shift, not only for the woman who stepped out of the home to work and then came back, then the men who came home from those wars, and they came home not unlike themselves anymore. And so we had to have these catching before you fall kind of things, from housing to the job market to having produce and good food, if you will, if that's layman's term, good food. And how do you do that if they don't have the income to buy it? So, boom, you get a policy. And those policies became almost permanent in some people's minds as people started to be born after, a particular generation. It's like you always had it. So you didn't know it was going to be a long term thing. So, as we look at the families here in Hardin County and anywhere else, we're thinking, okay, so what do we do, and how do we talk about this or walk this back, as you say, in plain English, which is very hard because I don't know if you saw the bill. I believe it's Senate Bill 5 for Kentucky. If you go back, back once it started, give you a headache. And I know a lot of people probably think, okay, here's another handout. I pay my taxes. I made it. I pull myself up by the bootstraps. Why can't they? Or you get kind of this split, and they'll say, for those who need it, I saw some of the responses to it when I posted it. It was like, sure, those who need it to go work and pay shouldn't. Well, if you look at the income of some of these individuals, some of them are on Medicaid, some are on WIC, some are on the nutritional program of SNAP. So that is part of the eligibility for it. But now it's like, how do we cover those people where the policy hits them the most? And that's the concern when you have
And
low income.
I had a very kind of come to Jesus moment with this, because I've seen that a lot of veterans right now that have been they're some of my most conservative friends and brothers. They really, it hit them hard when
Mm-hmm.
the first wave of this happened, when SNAP benefits were cut, some
Right,
months back during the shutdown.
right.
And like, wait, we're going to punish innocent kids by cutting off their meals? It's not, you know, that's not a way to operate. And then I thought back, to my childhood, because I had two different childhoods. It was really
Mm-hmm.
strange. From
Mm-hmm.
birth to about 4, um, I came from a family. My grandparents were from Appalachia, Eastern Kentucky, and mom and dad both basically grew up with, for their area, silver spoons
Yeah.
in their mouth. My grandfather had been dirt poor all of his life through the Depression. Made his Someone helped him get to medical school, and this is back before it cost an arm and a leg to go.
Mm-hmm.
And he got to go to undergrad at Kentucky Wesleyan, and then go to U
Mm-hmm.
of L for med school. Similar thing happened. I never got to meet my paternal grandfather, but he
Mm-hmm.
ended up becoming a lawyer, working doing night school in Louisville, and that night school later got rolled into Brandeis School of Law at U of L. But
Mm-hmm.
he actually became the JAG officer for MacArthur during World War II. He was actually one who went
Ooh.
into Japan, did all of the paperwork for the surrender, and then brought it back to the ship to be signed, with MacArthur and the Japanese. But anyway, he
Mm-hmm.
came back to Kentucky, got into politics, got into law. He died in his 50s. But both parents grew up with that silver spoon, but somehow they went off the rails, especially my mom. So she took us kids when my mom and dad divorced. She took me and my little brother
Mm-hmm.
to Texas, and we got into this fundamentalist mindset. And when the stepdad came in from Texas, he was all anti-government, you know.
Mm.
So we spent time every 6 to 18 months. We would move, and we'd lose everything we had,
Yep.
and every time we'd be digging in the dumpster for food. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when I'd be at public school, because they were anti-government, they wouldn't admit to the fact that, hey, we needed free lunch. You know, if we had some leftover split pea soup, maybe that's what my mom
Right.
would send me to school if I had anything. You know, just for the grace of God, there were kids who would always give me their scraps. Yeah. So I see that happening here. I see now if we're going to go back, there's going to be a lot of kids, you know, they're going to be eating scraps from their counterparts. You know, what do they have left over they didn't like that day, if they
Right.
get anything?
Right.
And currently, as a public school teacher, I saw it in Hardin County and I've seen it here. You know, kids come to school starving on Monday because they didn't
Mm-hmm.
eat anything on the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Their first meal is that free breakfast in the morning if they get there in time, right?
You're
Or
right.
maybe if they didn't get there in time, it's that free lunch.
Mm-hmm.
When you're starving, you know, and you're in the classroom, you're not thinking correctly, you're
Yeah.
not studying, and you're not behaving well either. It's not, you know, and you know you won't ever know that because they're not just going to come out and tell me. Usually, some kids I did, you know, they did tell me, I did figure it out, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the background that I think of here, you know. Now I don't know. Can you see on screen what I've got from
I
OAF Nation
can.
Act?
Yeah, I
So
can.
Senate Republicans are now seeking 1 billion taxpayer dollars for Trump's new White House ballroom project. This is the same ballroom project that he's been told by a court was unlawful because he didn't get congressional approval for it. This was supposed to have been built by the largesse, right, of all these billionaires like Bezos and Amazon and Tim Cook, formerly, you know, of
Mm-hmm.
Apple. We know that Palanger's
Mm-hmm.
been donating money, supposedly. So where did it all go?
Right.
Into the president's pockets? You know, now we know he's let the cat out of the bag because they were supposed to be silent donors, but of course he can't keep
Right.
anything silent. But I also, he's basically let us know that there's some, you know, secret stuff going down underneath that basement. You know, surveillance systems. Um, I would say with these data centers and with Palantir. You know, if you know the
Mm-hmm.
work that they did in Israel for years, surveilling people over there. So I just find it absolutely atrocious now that after being told this was going to be a free
I
East
know.
Wing renovation, $1
Mm-hmm.
billion. Started off, we heard earlier, oh, what was it Lindsey Graham was saying? Since as he was trying to 69-47,
Yeah.
he said something about, oh, they're going to ask for 400 million, right?
400 million, right? He was go to
That's what he
Congress to
started.
see if they could do it. Yeah.
And now they're saying 1 billion. I don't know when we're going to see, hey, we're just these guardians of the pedophiles. They
And
they're not going
it's
to stop.
hard. It is hard for people to phantom that in the information streams that come out. I saw a couple of people when it first came out. I said, "Man, what could 400? Just think of what 400 million could do for a school district. Didn't matter where." And so a response was, "Oh, are you running for Radcliffe mayor? Or are you running for the president?" And at first, I was like, shots fired. So I can't think two levels up. Is that what you're trying to tell me? And also
Mm-hmm.
understand everything trickles down in one way or the other. So I kind of looked at the response and I knew who said it, who wrote it. I was like, okay. So that's the same person who says, "Oh, I made it, so you made it." And what people don't understand is because we don't make money, we don't print money, we don't put numbers on money. The money is coming from the US Treasurer. It becomes ours once we earn it and put it in whatever account or under the mattress. So technically, when we pay our taxes back to these social programs and any other things, we're really giving the government back their money. And that's a hard concept for people to understand. And so when you look at 400 million, that's not including what the cost to get it to where it is now, down and delays and weather and that natural things that happen. And we bring this back to the community provision. Again, some people see that as a handout because it's a federal program. under the Department of Agriculture. And most people don't know we have 12 departments, and they have their sub agencies, and that is what the budget is supposed to fund.
That's
So,
right.
when you look at the Department of Agriculture, it oversees things like Future Farmers of America, which is right here in high schools. You
Absolutely.
you got to see the long reach. So when we talk about the CIP, again, that allowed schools to provide free breakfast and lunch to all, regardless of the family income, right? That's how it started, kind of like Black Panthers when they were trying to do it in their communities. The sororities and fraternities were also doing it at the turn of the century, the 19th century. So now it says the schools with the high percentage of low income students can qualify for CEP. Families at CEP schools usually do not need to fill out free reduced lunch applications. I saw a couple of people saying, I didn't get a memo. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. Then it says every student at the school can receive meals at no cost. The government reimburses the school based on how many students are automatically identified through programs like SNAP, Medicaid, those things, WIC, those social programs that affect that family unit's health, welfare, and safety. So when you talk about the changes here, when you say explain CEP, the lunch and breakfast are generally free for everyone, less paperwork, that kind of thing, right? But then and it does reduce administrative work because it's automatic. You don't have to keep looking it up and looking it up. However, when the percentage changed for the government that says we used to do what, 60%, I think, was the highest that the government was investing, and then it went to 40, and then it went to 25% for the CEP. And so now it's talking about the total amount of the population has reduced, that schools are going to cover, that now they're going to have to come out of their pocket versus what the federal government was doing. And that's really the big change. So for those who are eligible in those schools, they probably won't see a change in anything. They'll go to school and they'll get their meal like they normally do. The ones where it says look like they're eligible, that's kind of, I think that's left up to the discretion of the school system or the individual school. And then the ones who don't. So can you imagine coming in a 2 days later where you were eating with everybody and now you're not? And how that
Yeah.
student might feel. The student's not worried about the ballroom right now. They just
No.
a meal. But on the other side of the argument, you'll have people who still see that as some type of supplemental program for folks who are lazy, downtrodden, always got their hand out, could do better. I mean, we can throw all of the labels out that we want. And I tell people, you got to be careful about judging from your own comfort zone because it could happen to you very quickly. And then when it does, people want, the whole book of government to be thrown in to make sure that they are taken care of. So that's the most thing when you say explain the CEP. It's all about accessibility. It sounds similar to affordability. It's accessibility, and to cover that gap, to cover free meals for all students at the cost of food right now. Our schools have already said in Hardin County, the ones that we just can't do it because we can't cover the numbers. And I don't know what we're going to do for those students who are already going home on the weekend, perhaps with their school bag, their backpack to get them through the week. We got seniors with boxes, not high school seniors, but seniors in age. And you're thinking, okay, so where do you put your cornage, when those other programs are also being reduced? And
Well, they
I,
ended Meals on Wheels. You were talking about that earlier.
yep, Meals
This
on Wheels.
administration cut that. Doge
Yeah,
cut it. And
yep, Meals on
and
Wheels.
for a lot of families in Hardin County, this, we call it a pandemic era policy, but it wasn't a luxury, right? It was that lifeline for these hungry kids. So
But
when
but
it
it's rolled
ended,
out as a luxury. So
well,
is SNAP. People
yeah,
argue about other people
it's
getting
not,
it, and I said until
you know,
you get it.
but we don't argue about, all the bombs we're dropping in Iran. So when it ended, the question became, what's going to fill this gap? Now that's where the community eligibility provision,
Hmm.
what you and I are calling the CEP, came in.
Mm-hmm.
And, you've already explained to me in pretty plain English what that is. So, what my question is, the key number here is what's the identified student percentage, the ISP? That's the percentage of students who are directly certified for free meals
Right.
through programs like SNAP,
Mm-hmm.
Medicaid, WIC, or foster care. Now,
Mm-hmm.
no paperwork is needed on the family's end.
Right.
The government already knows they qualify.
Right.
So here's where the numbers get really important and a little complicated. Um, and if, hopefully the viewers will bear with us. But
Mhm.
let's go on now and do the numbers explanation.
The
So,
timeline.
yeah, so a quick
Mm-hmm.
timeline of where the ISP threshold has been over the years because it's moved around quite a lot. At
Mm-hmm.
one point, the threshold was 60%, meaning that 6 out of 10 students had to be directly certified before a
Right.
school could offer free meals to everyone. I think that's really still where we're at, according to reports that I've seen. But
Mm-hmm.
it dropped to 40% for a while, which
Yes.
still left a lot of schools on the outside looking in, but it did not leave, North Hardin High School on the outside looking in when it was there,
Mm-hmm.
when I taught there. Then on October 26, 2023, the Biden administration lowered it even more to 25%. And that was a significant expansion that made nearly 130 additional Kentucky schools newly eligible. And of course, well, that really helped because I've been teaching since 2021. I did the Troops of Teachers program.
Mm-hmm.
And man, that's made so many of those kids that came to school anxious, hungry,
Yep.
and inattentive, that
Mm-hmm.
really brought them back online. So,
Mm-hmm.
under today's rules, if 25% or more school students are directly certified, that school qualifies for CEP, free
Mm-hmm.
breakfast and lunch for everybody. Except now, Hardin County is being hit with this 60% CEP, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
So for the 2024-25 school year, every single Hardin County school is participating in CEP because we're at that 25% point, but every student gets a free meal, and that's a big deal. But of course, here's the but, right? That may not last
Right.
now that next year it's going to go up to the 60%. Now, the thing that, of course, I'm sure you're going to agree with me is interesting is as we already said, we hit families hard with SNAP here in this county,
Mm-hmm.
and that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't just families living out here in the regular economy. That was even folks over in Fort Knox. I know folks who work and services over there helping folks get things they need. At times like
Mm-hmm.
this, they said that the lines were longer than they'd ever seen for getting free food. And at my church, we just have like a little box that we fill with provisions. On the
Right.
front, people can walk up and get it. It used
Right.
to be 3, 4 people a week. It tripled,
Oh,
and
I
I don't
know.
think it's even gone down. I see that thing is bare. We have to go refill it constantly. Um, so, what do you think that we all need to understand about that? About the but?
The but, if you take the but back to 2010, this was part of the Hunger Free Kids Act because we all know if kids are, if the tummies are full, it makes it easier to learn. They're not there being shameful and listless and whatever else that happens when you've been hungry for a long time. And so when it was piloted in 2011 and 12 during the school year for a couple of states, it's like, okay, it's working. We see some goodness. Expanded over the state and several states until it went nationwide in 2014 and 15 of school years. And so that when you look at 2010, you go, what was happening in 2010? But anyway, so with this program allowing schools to qualify in low income areas, providing them things, and we talk about, well, how do we make people understand what the question really is, how do you make people be empathetic? Because people still see this as another social program for people who could do better.
But wait just a second now. You got to remember the fearless quasi leader Musk told us that empathy is what is making Western civilization weak.
He
It's a
did.
bad word.
He really really did, and I tried to understand where it came from. It almost made you feel like, okay, you're a punk if you put yourself in someone else's situation. You're being taken advantage of if you put yourself in someone else's situation. So goalposts are being moved in this situation at the federal level, and then of course it trickles down through the state, and of course at the rubber meets the road at the school. The money's got to come from somewhere. But if you have parents or guardians who are working certain jobs where it has not kept up with cost of living, or they don't have the skill set, they don't have the credentials, they're just doing the same people we rely on when we go to that Mexican restaurant, when we get our gas. We don't worry about it when they're doing the roof on their house, or they are at the cleaners taking our clothes. It's amazing how we don't notice that kind of thing. But if that same person needed help, which if they're getting help, then that helps us because they can do their job. But it's just amazing how some people are really lacking empathy unless it affects them. And right now, people ask me, they go, Terry, do you have any kids at school? I said, no. Courtney came out of Fort Knox. She's a Hilltopper, undergrad and grad. I said, but they're all mine. That's why I go to the school board. That's why I post these kind of things. And I said, just in case you didn't know, because I don't expect people who don't have skin in the game, they don't have kids, grandkids, whatever, foster kids, system, that they don't understand this is just the routine chipping away at programs. And I know they're not supposed to last forever, but there's got to be a better way to do it. So you
But
don't
we
want
can
people
fund Forever
in it.
Wars Forever,
Well, we can, because that's
right?
different.
And we can start another one, and we can, fund
That's
everlasting White
different,
House
but
renovation
it's
forever,
create dependency. You don't want to create dependence. You want people to get up off of what that's holding them down.
unless
If I
they're
go back,
billionaires, then they can be dependent
correct,
all the time, right?
correct. Because from 13 to 18, we had SNAP, well, food stamps, and Section 8 when my parents divorced, Marine and Army nurse later. They're the closest divorced people now. They weren't when we were younger. And so we moved from a red line district, now that we know how those things were done, and then moved to an apartment complex. We were low income. You're talking about less than $25,000. And the average low income here in Hardin County, according to the census, the current census, is 30,000. So if you slide 30,000 across 12 months and you take out utilities and mortgage or rent or whatever it is, the cost of living, you don't have a whole lot to deal with. And if you have more than one child, because you got your pro-choice folks who want you to have children or to give them up in baby boxes versus having your own decision for yourself. They'd rather for them to be on the system. I mean, I'm in CASA. I was just in family court this
No, they don't
morning.
want them to be in the system. They just want them
Don't
to be
want them to be in the
born, and then
system.
that's
They
it.
just want them born. So
Yeah, yeah.
so
Then they're, the wolves can raise them, or I
right.
don't know what
So
we
if you
have here,
don't have the
coyotes.
income, but you don't plan to be on the system for long, then how do you knock them for needing that particular help and not having it for long term? And the kids are getting caught in the middle of that.
And the kids are the ones that are paying the price for this.
They
Literally,
are
they're absolutely, because the goalposts they just have been moved at the federal level, up, down, sideways,
right,
left, right, all around. And the families, man, it's not that they're doing anything wrong.
right.
They're just trying to make it, a living here. But also,
Hmm.
right now, we got another thing going on. Who can afford the gas that we're buying? So if they got to choose between taking filling the car up so they can drive to work, or now paying for their kids to have lunch that used to be free, man, you are putting someone in a rock and a hard place because they got to get to work, or we're going to call them lazy and shiftless. And at the same time, their kids have got to eat too. So, if they don't work, does that mean that then they qualify for a free lunch and it'll be okay? That's what that that
Well,
that
I mean,
that's that spiral we put people in.
We do, and we keep some people there. Unfortunately, it's like a caste system. We know we don't pay them their worth, and yet we say pick yourself up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, this biggest change for agriculture and lowering the thresholds for schools to qualify. Hmm.
Well, hey, do you remember what they're actually qualifying for? I mean, when was the last time you ate a school a meal at school?
Probably about 6 months ago in North
Six
Middle.
months?
I've served meals from over there, yeah, and ate
Yeah.
them, yeah. And I was just in
And
Bluegrass Middle School last week.
did it make you all kinds of you know, excited, or would you rather not have to go through that sometimes? Let's take it back even a little bit further to when this became a
Okay.
controversy back in the '83. You and I were just what, kids then? Maybe eating
Mhm.
school lunch ourselves, or
Mhm.
I wish I was. Like I said, I usually didn't get it.
School, cooking from scratch is a lovely idea. It might not be feasible for a lot of school districts. Not only are there the cost and labour issues, but they also need to navigate strict nutritional guidelines. The federal government sets standards for things like the amount and types of fruits and vegetables required to be on a plate, but it can be hard to meet them on a tight budget. Something famously illustrated during the Reagan era, when his administration slashed the federal school lunch budget, then briefly tried bending the nutritional guidelines to a truly ridiculous extent.
Also getting attention today was that elementary school lunch sampled by members of Congress yesterday. The meal, consisting of a small meat patty, 6 French fries, a glass of milk, and ketchup, classified as a vegetable, was representative of new federal guidelines issued to save money on subsidized school lunches.
Now, much has been made about the whole ketchup as a vegetable thing, but I don't think people talked enough about the mystery meat patty being served with a glass of milk. That looks like a hamburger with terminal illness. It looks like the cracked soil of a Dust Bowl era farm. You know, I read once that marathon runners in Death Valley would eat bananas, then throw them up, and the banana vomit would bake in the sun, forming little patties on the ground. And I bet it looks like that. The point is, ketchup isn't a vegetable. Reagan made things worse, and I've been trying to offload that banana fact for the past 5 years. And the thing is, even when, with good intentions, we manage to raise the nutritional standards for lunches, it can then be a real challenge to make them appetizing. During the Obama administration, access to school lunches was expanded greatly thanks to the 2010 Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act, which also updated guidelines to make meals more nutritious. And while that act produced great results overall, some students hated the new healthier options, sharing photos with the hashtag Thanks Michelle Obama, which, to their credit, is funny. When nutrition went high, the kids went low.
Low. Yeah.
But it did take some trial, error, and flexibility to make those new standards work. For instance, the act required that breads had to be whole grain rich. But as one food service director in New Mexico said, many families in the Southwest will not accept whole grain tortillas. And I quote, "We simply cannot afford to feed our trash cans." Similarly, a school district in Mississippi tried to make a 100% whole grain biscuit, which was not received as well by students. So the school is now allowed to operate on 80% of whole grains instead, which does feel like a good compromise, because a whole grain biscuit is not a biscuit. At that point, let's just make ice cream sandwiches where the cookies are celery and the ice cream is children's Motrin, because it seems words don't matter anymore. The fact is, school nutrition directors have to strike a delicate balance between the perfect and the achievable. That former Noma chef you saw earlier gets incredibly frustrated when talking about how chefs who work outside of school kitchens tend to look down on some of the food that he makes now.
It's funny because we've had a lot of my peers.
So, he goes on to talk about the big thing that, all that applied to us just now, but also $4 a child is what we're looking at. That $4 is supposed to pay the person that's preparing and serving the food.
Right.
And it's supposed to buy the food. Now, I think all the crap that our school lunch ladies go through, I think they deserve to be paid a living wage. And I don't think you can feed kids all that nutritious food that they need and pay them a living wage with benefits on
Mm-hmm.
$4 per child. So again, I know I'm taking away that $1 billion they need for that ballroom if we do this, but I think that's what we're talking about, right?
We are, and for any of these programs for grown-ups, children, elderly, any subgroup you can put label on. I think it really comes down to that instinct of fairness where some people think, okay, why should we reward them for their effort, or reward should match their effort, that if they're earning something without doing what is required by the system, then it looks unfair to the people who are, as they see themselves, are. And then, like I said about that fear of dependency, we all heard about the welfare queen. They just didn't tell you that wasn't an African American, Hispanic, Latin American, because the system wasn't made for them originally. So when they celebrated the Caucasian woman, it didn't come out as much as you thought it was. It always looked like it was some other person, but it wasn't even created for us at the time. So when you talk about fear of dependency, the worry of that additional support, does that reduce the motivation for people to get up, to work, to contribute, to eat better? Again, the kids are caught in the middle of this. And so whether those
Completely.
things actually happens really depends on how that program is implemented, and then the perception. You know how the stereotype of going for therapy and living in a certain zip code or coming to school looking a certain way. There's always some issue about perception, because like I know perception is powerful. It's about as powerful as popularity can be. And then everything has a status and an identity. I can pay for mine. Can't you pay for yours? Or cultures who rather send their kids to school with their lunch boxes. You remember when lunch boxes became a real thing? It became a business.
Oh
You
yeah.
can be on your thermos and your square box with maybe Mickey Mouse on it. And then we went thermal, bags where it would keep the temperature. You had pockets on the side, it glowed in the dark, did all sorts of things. And kids had to feel some type of way if they didn't have the right lunch bag. And so you're talking about status and identity in cultures that emphasize, self-reliance. And that's what I think a lot of people respond on, is that self-reliance and the fear of dependency, and also that fairness. If I can pull myself up, you should too. And then you also have people who resist help, who need the help. And then of course that last thing, when resources are limited and
Well,
there's a limited assistance.
when I first started teaching at North Hardin High School,
Mm-hmm.
one of the assistant principals, he's actually principal now at another school, but
Mm-hmm.
assistant principal Mahone, he was the ninth grade principal there. He
He's
decided
at
that
Radcliffe now.
yep,
Yep.
and he decided that all of the new teachers were going to do one thing in the heat of the summer when we first, we're having our opening days,
Mm-hmm.
and that was they were going to ride the bus,
Yep.
the same bus that the kids rode,
I
with
did that.
our
Yeah.
masks on, because remember that was during COVID in 21.
Yep.
And we were going to see all the communities in Radcliffe that this bus serviced. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember going over there to that. There, I think it's Mill Baptist. Is that the name of it? I believe.
Mill
Out
Creek,
into Mill Creek Baptist. Yeah, on the way out, that road that leads to that, right?
Southland.
Passing through
Mm-hmm.
an area where there's a lot of trailers,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like I was back in Appalachia. I felt like I was
Yep.
back in Eastern Kentucky, and I
Yep.
actually flashbacks to my childhood,
Mm-hmm.
living abject poverty in a trailer,
Mm-hmm.
and having to eat, like I said, go do dumpster diving, to get
Right.
food, behind Safeway and other places, depending on where I lived, to get food, and the embarrassment that caused. And it really was extremely good for us
Mm-hmm.
to realize what the kids had to go through. How, number one, what it was like to be on the hot bus with no air conditioning, what it was like to have to wear a mask on the hot bus with no air conditioning, and then to see, all the trailer parks, the low income housing apartment complexes. And then there's some good, upscale, really good upscale living in Radcliffe also, but seeing it all, just it really, it brought it home. And that was a good starter. So I want to look at, really, let's look at the threat. We've got some threats if this ISP threshold should go back up. Threat number one, if that ISP threshold should go back up, and it's going to, from the way Congress is rolling right now, so they're going to raise that minimum back to that 60%, like we're talking about, and that's why Hardin County is out now preparing everybody for it, and that's where it was before it was lowered to 25%. So if that happens, schools with an ISP between 25% and 59%, they're going to lose this CEP eligibility that we're talking about. So they're going to lose this free breakfast and lunch for all. And that's potentially a huge number of schools, including about 9, if I remember correctly, right here in Hardin County, with North Hardin being one of them, John Hardin and Central Hardin high schools, not just elementary schools. So threat number 2 would be changes to the reimbursement multiplier. So here's a piece of the puzzle most people don't hear about. When a school participates in the CEP, the federal government reimburses meals using a formula. It's a 1.6 times the ISP. So if your school has 40% of students that are directly certified, the feds reimburse at 64% of meals at the free rate. And the Captain Bone Spurs administration could reduce that multiplier from 1.6 to 1.3 without needing congressional approval. We know that Captain Bone Spurs, and we've already seen a history of that. Doge was our big shot, the first salvo. So that would mean that CEP school gets less federal money, and some districts that were currently participating could have to drop out because it no longer makes financial sense. So threat number 3, and this is one we've hit on a little bit earlier, changes to SNAP. This one is huge and it's often overlooked. SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps, is one of the primary ways that students get directly certified easily. But if families lose SNAP benefits, fewer students are directly certified. So if fewer students are certified, the school's ISP goes down. And if it drops below that 25%, that school loses CEP eligibility entirely. So, speak to me about that.
They're interconnected. They really are interconnected, and they're not just the only things that some people see this as a handout. Tax credits is a subsidy. Disaster relief is a subsidy. Roads and infrastructure is a subsidy. And so, again, it's that stigma of, I'm doing okay. Why can't you do okay? Because it is a status when you're able to go and buy what you need and not think about, I'm getting to my limit. I'm going to have to put something back, because I've done that. I've had to put something back in my earlier years. And so to be able to eat like the rest of the kids who don't get a subsidy lunch is a status and identity, because when you don't have any empathy, but you do have a connection to status and identity, kids don't really know anything about that. And so, but grown people do, and they put that kind of pressure on kids to feel some type of way, right? They're not getting something, or someone is getting more than they should. And now we go back to that perception of fairness or unfairness, or now we're creating another dependency. But it kind of all goes back to, if we paid people a living wage, then they wouldn't have to have these subsidies to fill in the gap. They could do it on their own. But we're paying people to do jobs around the world. And I mean, you can go to your house and pick up a cup and see where it's been made, because it says made in. But if we paid people, they wouldn't depend on these things. Even Soldier Wick in EBT cards. And when people see, happen to be standing in Walmart and they see a soldier whip out a card, they're like, oh my God, they're clutching their pearls and thinking, I said, that's a specialist, what I used to be in E4. And maybe that E4 has 2 kids. Have you seen the base pay of a specialist?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And so that specialist also has to get gas and eggs just like everybody else, and they just can't afford it. But they're protecting the entire nation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're on call. They are at the whim of the Department of Defense, or in this case, Department of War, and we can go anywhere, anytime, any place. But the family unit still has to eat. They still have to buy Pampers. You talked about Mr. Mahomes. He told me about a month ago he had to go buy 2 cans of Enfamil, or I said baby formula, for a parent.
Yeah, I know he made a lot of house calls
Mhm.
when he was assistant principal. I bet he's doing even more so now.
Mhm.
Well, let's get another little example of
Okay.
before the 2010 rollout that you talked about and that I highlighted there with that reel, and
Mhm.
really right about the time right before Biden lowered this down to 25%, the CEP and the ISP calculation got better. I want to see if you remember this story that broke my heart when it made national
Fiery
news.
debate that began in a school cafeteria in Colorado, making national headlines tonight. A lunch lady decided to give out free lunch to first graders who had no money. Some calling it an act of kindness, but she lost her job because of it. ABC's Clayton Sandell speaks to her tonight.
I was out.
Della Curry knew she could be fired, but she did it anyway.
I was let go for giving away free food.
Curry says she lost her job at this Colorado elementary school for giving a pass to kids who didn't have enough money to pay for lunch.
So I hated to see food thrown away that could have been given to these children that are hungry, that could use it.
After 3 warnings,
I would have kids start crying when I told them that they didn't have money in their account.
district policy says no more hot meals, just a cheese or turkey sandwich.
There are kids who are going hungry because they're too embarrassed to get the cheese sandwich, so they don't come through line.
The school district says no child ever goes hungry. They won't give much detail about Curry's firing, but will say
she was fired for violating the district policy around how food is distributed. If an employee is concerned about a family, then they are obligated to bring that to our attention.
Curry says she is just beginning to fight against a policy she believes needs to change.
Doing what is right is not what is easy.
Clayton Sandell, ABC News, Aurora, Colorado.
And I don't
do
think that was the only story. I think there were more.
There were a couple more.
Yeah,
there were a couple more, but policy precedes.
Yeah.
And look, when you say 2010, I know we got to stick to that script, but before 2010, schools only had 2 categories that they have to really worry about. It was the individuals on free lunch and the individuals who were not. And they didn't have this kind of digital system that will identify them from the folks who were already getting the SNAP, that kind of thing, and the average income and below income and all of those things. It was more manual to get that information. And so, again, people will look at this as a system that created problems to make everything feel like a handout. So you hear that on the news and people's like, oh, you're always getting the handout, you're getting the handout. But the students were visibly separated and identified with free lunch and paid lunch groups. Just like she said about the sandwich, they get the different meal. And so while everybody else is getting a salad, an apple, or that square pizza, or a dollop of mashed potatoes with the gravy, the other kid over here with, the Crustable, a carton of milk, and some carrot sticks. It's like, that's what you're going to get because we can't subsidize you, or you just don't fall into that category. So now
and stuff that's already, I have to pay $5 if I want to go eat the school lunch.
Right.
I'm not going to pay $5 for that. And I every day I choose. All right, I'll bring my own lunch.
Can you imagine the infinity circle where it says families have to prove then low income through paperwork. Now it's digitally done. And then it says, like it was saying on the thing about the teacher, kids will avoid their meals because of the embarrassment and the stigma if they're getting the non-free lunch tray versus the free lunch tray. And now you've got schools that accumulate unpaid lunch debt from families just above the cutoff. And I saw that, I want to say 2 years ago, and someone's going to correct me, I'm sure, on the responses, but I believe Hardin County had a debt of just free lunch somewhere between 5 and maybe 7,000. And so one of the senior classes collected spare change, that people have around
Awesome.
their house and in their car to try to defray some of that cost. And
Yeah.
it's hard. It's like if we paid people a living wage, they will be less reliant, hopefully, in the short run on things like this. But when we don't, and the CEP or CEP changes and it allows high poverty in schools to serve, that feel like they have to serve free meals, subsidized things without collecting individual applications. So, because they're identified in being in programs. Why, if people don't have empathy for this that's going on, they just see it as a handout. And now you've got these kids that are having their own grown-up issues because they are getting assistance. They're getting it. They're feeling like, okay, I'm the bad guy because my
Yeah.
mom, dad, or whoever my guardian is
Yep.
doesn't earn enough.
Yep. Absolutely. And every night I like to take a little pause for a puppy break.
Mm-hmm.
So before we go into segment 4 and talk about the near eligible category and the grace year, let's just have a little moment of joy here, if you don't mind, since dogs are my joy,
Dogs
providers.
are mine too. I haven't had one since we left Fort Hood. We had a miniature
Well,
Doberman.
we've got 4 in my house, but here a friend of mine sent me these in. I'm like, yeah, I'll show them. Yeah, sometimes we just got to remember the ones that make us happy, right?
You're right. You're right.
Um,
I'm in the Friends of Hardin County Animal Shelter, so I get my fixes on Saturdays sometimes when I'm over there helping to keep the animals socialized and happy and
and I got
exercise.
my service dog from there, man.
Yeah,
He's something else.
yeah,
Well, so now not every school, is on this same cliff edge here that we're talking about, right?
hmm
There's something called the near eligible category. Now,
right.
Councilwoman, can you explain what that means for families?
That it may be the difference between $10 and $5 on that total income. So it gives the school a little bit of an ability or discretion to go, with it, this one still falls up under the 25, So they got a little bit to work with, but it's not a lot.
Right. So under the current rules, schools with an ISP between 15 and 24% are considered near eligible. They
Right,
don't currently qualify for full CP, but they may still be able to get a grace year.
right,
Of
a little
course, we
bit,
all want
yeah.
a grace year. Essentially,
hmm
that's that 1 year buffer to maintain free meals while they work toward qualifying or figure out a different path. Now, schools above 25%
Right.
are fully in. Schools in that 15 to
hmm
24% range, they might get that grace year we're talking about, but schools
hmm
below 15%, they're out. And
Yep,
families are back to paying or applying for free and reduced price meal programs the old way. And
yep,
here's the frustrating part, even schools that technically qualify at 25% may find the reimbursement doesn't fully cover costs for all students. So,
right.
of course, like I said, I teach in JCPS. So in Jefferson County, officials have said a school needs to be closer to 59% low income for the
hmm
federal reimbursement to fully cover the cost of extending free meals to everyone. So, what do you make of that?
And you're going to hear me say it over and over, is if we paid people their worth, they wouldn't need these programs or they wouldn't need it as much or as long. So generally these things aren't designed for long term anyway, or to keep people in low income. However, the benefits of it, the kids come to school, attendance is great. As a teacher, I used to be a substitute teacher. I had third, fourth, and fifth grade. It improves their concentration. You get better health outcomes. That's what we like to see are the outcomes. But of course, people still get criticized for assistance programs. That's really what it is. Because in the broader sense, it's like, oh, okay, we got benefits off the cliff. What happens when things like this happen? How are we going to stand in the gap? So as I said, if families earn more, unfortunately, kind of like in the movie Claudine, you earn more, you lose what you got, and the grace time for you to land is very hard. And so it's like if I could just get in a step down mode, a little bit, a little bit, a little bit at a time. But then when you have these multiple support systems all at once going off, SNAP, WIC, anything in the Department of Agriculture, if it just becomes unbalanced all at the same time, you get this wave. It's like, where do they land and what can they do? Do we need to, is it time for some people to get raises? I don't know. It just depends on who they work for. And if they do, is it short term, a long term? And so it's kind of like the stimulus check. But I don't know if you noticed, when the stimulus checks were put out, did you notice in Walmart where the televisions went? They came off the shelf, the displays, and they all went up front, the 65-inch, the 52-inch, all the stuff that they knew we were going to buy. If you ask people what they did with their stimulus check, you get a variety of, from save to pay off a bill to get some item that they wouldn't have gotten, in the beginning. And so when we try
No,
to
wait,
bring
you
this
talk about
home,
that stimulus check that I was going to get because of the tariffs? Because I'm still waiting
not
on that
that
one.
no, not that one. The ones
Oh,
the
okay.
ones way back. Right.
Right.
And so you look at this as it's a stimulus, it's a social program. It stimulates that ability to concentrate for kids and to come in a better frame of mind and to be able to just be a kid. But when this trickle down effect of cutting these things off, not slow, well, it could be slow if you look at when it started in 2010, but when it happens during an administration like this, and this isn't the only administration, but these financial crunches from all directions, clothes, produce, whatever it is, the kids are caught in the middle and they're in the gap. I mean, I know about the cruising cafe, right? That happens in the summer here in Hardin
Yes.
County. I
Yes. Well,
spot.
you tell people that don't know about it what that is, though, because that's
Right. The
extremely
Cruising
important.
Cafe is another subsidized program by the school system to get the children under 18 that are in, for example, Hardin County School. They get basically free lunch during the summer. And anybody 18 or over that is eligible, I think last year before, the meal was 3,000 some cents. And so there were locations that they went to, like one of the mobile park homes on Hill Street, or one of the schools, and the General Dollar Store was a collection point. And I went with them to one of the mobile home parks. I met them. I didn't ride the bus because I wasn't supposed to. I met them there, and they had the cheese and ham and cheese and turkey. It wasn't, it wasn't anything floury. It was the hoagie bread, the apples or whatnot. And at one mobile spot, it was 40 kids.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
that
yeah.
program starts, say, the first week in June, and it'll go through June, July, and get them ready for school in August, because our kids go back to school the first week in August. I think on the East Coast, they do it after Labor Day. And one of the days, the meal count was just over $400. I mean, 400 people.
Yeah.
That's a huge cost for a school system, plus the maintenance and of course, the maintenance and the fuel just for the bus itself, and then the two people that were on the bus. And they did it every day
Absolutely.
for, a period of time. Imagine that not being here this year. And I don't know if it is. I have to look it up and see. And so, again, these gaps, we know they're coming. We have to weed people off. but we also have to pay people a living wage so they don't have to have these things for a long period of time.
Absolutely. And again, it's just back to what I lived as a child. Know what hunger's like. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I know what it's like to watch my mom while she was pregnant with my sister
Mm-hmm.
only have oatmeal for supper,
Right. Cream of
and
wheat.
that's not.
I'm here for you. I know I was a cream of wheat baby. I
We couldn't
know.
even afford cream of wheat. I liked it when it was cream of wheat. I wished it was cream of wheat. Cream of wheat was much more delicious. But oatmeal with just water, no milk, no sugar.
No sugar, no
That's and
syrup,
that's
none of that, no butter.
And then we wonder why my mom ended up with like ovarian. Was it? Well, she ended up with female cancer while she had my sister. My sister had some developmental delays, and
Mm-hmm.
we've been developing, dealing with that now into adulthood. I've got custody of one of her kids. My mom has custody of the other. And I just take it all back to inadequate nutrition during pregnancy
Right.
and even after, pregnancy. So the fact that we have a society that's the richest in the world and is so without empathy and willing to let people starve, have birth defects, but
Mm-hmm.
while we still insist they have those kids, it's just appalling to me. Especially someone like you and I have been overseas. We've seen what really
Yes.
horrific lives can be like. Why
Yes.
do we want to create anything even similar to that over here just out of choice? That's what bothers me.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
like what
Uh,
Viking Lloyd says, the less you work, the less you need to work. It's a conundrum. And it
yeah,
really is. It's if we paid them, they wouldn't need these things.
yeah. Well, and as we got Gastros on here saying he's
Mm-hmm.
proud of us. We got Tom on here, and those were his dogs we saw running around
Mm-hmm.
earlier. A just society would feed every student decent breakfast and lunch to
Mm-hmm.
remove the stigma of eating the free lunch. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what's been going on, since I started
Right.
teaching.
Right.
But, or later on, once 23 hit and President Biden made it, this 25% CP that we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about. But the
Mm-hmm.
fact, that kids haven't had to have that stigma and, there's so much that kids have to go with if they're, poor, um, neglected, abused, and
Mm-hmm.
just giving us teachers one less thing to have to,
Yes.
to fight with every day in order to get kids educated. Like, come on, if nothing else, have mercy on us teachers. If you're not going to have it on the kids, have mercy on the kids in order to have mercy on us. I mean, I don't know what to really say to some people to get them to have that empathy. I mean, I remember, I know a lot of people around here like the
Mm-hmm.
story of this guy named JC that multiplied some loaves of bread and fish. I just
Mm-hmm.
don't remember him asking them. Did he ask them about their CEP and
Probably
whether they
not.
actually worked hard enough for it? Because he
Or
was having them
deserve it
sit out
somehow.
there. Yeah, yeah. When did they have to
Yeah.
work before they got to hear him preach too? I wonder. I can't remember. I know he had him out there for a while. That's why they were getting
Yeah.
hungry. But well, let's go on in to segment 5. What this
Mm-hmm.
means for Hardin County families. So if we bring it home, straight here to us, what does it actually look like for parents here in Hardin County right now? And what do they need
I
to
would
know
say
and what should they be doing?
they should understand what their CEP status is. Um, Important to make sure that their income is reported on the forms that are required by the school. Don't assume that the student is bringing it home in a timely fashion or bring it home at all. If you have
Yeah.
something in a day or two, because this is a hot button item, I would
Yeah.
tell the parents or grandparents, whoever the guardians are, to contact their school just to make sure they're not missing anything at
And I'll
all.
be honest with you, I would fill it out at the school. I
Yeah.
don't know. I've got custody of my niece, like I said, and she would leave stuff in her backpack forever,
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
me being a busy person that I am, I'll be like, you know what? I'll just go fill it out at school, day of, sign up, make sure, get it all done because we want every kid to be fed. That's just, the
Right.
biggest thing.
We do. We
So,
really do.
and I want to highlight something really important here. Even when all students qualify for free meals under CEP, Hardin County Schools still ask parents to complete a meal participation form.
They do.
And this isn't to determine, their lunch eligibility, but it's because other federal and state programs depend on that income data.
Right.
Title I funding, for example. So even if your kids are eating for free, filling out that form helps keep resources flowing to the school. And we are a district that has a lot of Title I funding, and we can't lose that if, parents, just work with us, please, because we want to help you help your kids.
Right.
Because we know that you can't afford that $3.25 or $4 lunch, no matter what anybody else wants to say. We know that $5 gas, is not helping any of us. So, what do you think people need to think when they hear about that free lunch? And
because as soon as you say free, it's attached to a stigma, or people see it as a handout. But when you talk about Title I funding, it is the largest federal assistance program for public schools. And I wouldn't need people to know that if they don't have children or they're not somehow related to a school system. You're talking $14 billion annually, give or take a million maybe, low income students in high poverty schools. Well, it goes back to if we paid people an income that kept up with the cost of living, they wouldn't have to rely on this either at all or as long. It just depends on what's going on in the family. But and all of this goes back to closing the achievement gaps for funding for extra stuff, classroom materials, specialized programs, schools with, 40% low income generally got certain things school-wide or targeted support. But then that even created a caste system because it depended on what your school system looked like. Here, you're in JCPS. And I know they want, there was going to be a split. It was huge. And then we got Hardin County schools. And then we have Elizabethtown Independent Schools. And you got different funding for different things. But Title I is supposed to support disadvantaged students. Well, students wouldn't be disadvantaged if the people who were taking care of them actually made a living wage.
Exactly. That's what we really.
We're creating this need, and now we're burning that need. I was like, but we created the atmosphere. Yes, and some people can do more than others. Some can have a skill that they can go to work with. Some may be sitting at home. There may be some cultural competencies about who works where and how long and how do they get to a job. But what's stuck in there are the kids. If you remember when we had the latch kid thing, because then both parents or grandma and all of them, as they say, big mama, everybody was working and the kids got home off the bus or walked from school and they had the key. I know I had the key on my little neck here. And
there's still a lot of latchkey kids. A whole lot.
It is. And some of them are displaced kids. They're couch surfing. They're literally homeless.
Yep. If they're lucky, they're couch surfing. Yeah.
Yep.
So, let's go on to segment 6 here. Look at the bigger picture, the advocacy and action, because I know that has been something that, man, I'm hearing you and I'm just impressed. So, Councilwoman, you've spent decades in service. That's military service. And now city council, and you've seen bureaucracy from the inside out. So when you look at this situation, what do you want residents to understand about how these decisions get made and what power ordinary people have to push back?
Let's start with the bottom up. Ordinary people are the people. And that's why I try to or encourage people to come on out to city council meetings or anywhere where they can understand how policy and governance should be going together. And so, yes, I've had 30 years in the Army and 2 years as a substitute teacher, did little work in engineering. I've been in the Pentagon, Walter Reed, and some other places, and 6 years here. And I've even commanded here and staffed here. I've had a staff assignment, and I've been a troop commander at a hospital where my budget was $24 million, right? And so, of course, healthcare is expensive. And spending decades and seeing how other countries do what they do on the social scheme, which is something we just don't want here because it's a high tax need to do that, to make sure everybody's kind of based across the top. So when we look at this situation, you said, what do I want residents to understand about these decisions? They need to understand how they're made and that they really have the power to make a little change. But this one right here, because it's so connected to income, and if their income doesn't change because they don't have the skill set to
And
work
that's that
somewhere,
ISP, right?
that's it. It's the ISS.
Yeah.
So it's not hopeless. It's just making sure that people understand the cards that have been dealt and can they change that outcome of that hand? What can they do? And as we talk about civic engagement, contact your representatives, attend school board meetings, understand what school ISP is, and then speak up before cuts happen rather than, being reactive. And again, for the people who don't have any children, this kind of goes over this, but it's really about the whole community. And you
We've
don't
all
want
got kids because they're going to
afterward.
be the person that's going to be serving us
Right,
at the hospital. They're going to
right.
be the person that's going to be hopefully taking those jobs, down there in Glendale if we get that that battery plant back up and
Mhm,
running. So we do all have kids. We're going
mhm.
if you think that education doesn't matter because you don't have kids, well, you're going to be the one complaining if they don't know how to count change at the
Right,
cash register later.
right.
So I think that is a key point. This is still a moving target, this
It
ISP
is.
and the
It is.
CEP. So the budget proposals are still working through Congress.
Mhm.
The SNAP rule changes are being debated. Oh my gosh. And the multiplier hasn't been cut yet. But the time to act is before that policy becomes law, not after that bill shows up. So now let's go on to segment 7 here.
Mhm.
Let's do a little quick reference. Let's look at some key numbers. So
Okay.
before we wrap up, let me give everyone a quick cheat sheet. You might want to write stuff down. You got time here, maybe
Mhm.
pause it later, go back,
Mhm.
so you know exactly where things stand. Because this is really something serious for us here in Hardin County.
It is.
So the CEP threshold history, it
Mhm.
was 60% ISP. Very
Mhm.
few schools qualified, even though
Mhm.
we got, people hurting in the communities. Then it was lowered to 40%.
Right.
Then more schools qualified, but it was still limited.
Yep.
Now, when it was lowered again to 25% on October
Mhm.
26, 2023, that was
Mhm.
a major expansion. And I remember thinking when that happened, oh my God, they must have seen that report about that lady who got fired, or school lunch ladies who got fired because they were feeding kids,
They were.
food instead of getting thrown away. I was like, man, that's
Mhm.
not going to happen anymore. I was blown away, especially since I had, been teaching for a couple of years by that point. Now, Congress may push it back to 60%, which would knock out many schools. And when I say many schools, that's 9 here in our Hardin County schools.
Mhm.
I didn't get the number for Elizabethtown schools. I should have, but we can look those up again. Go to the Elizabethtown school board meetings. So the categories right now: 25% plus ISP. That's
Mhm.
fully CEP eligible.
Mhm.
Free meals for all students, as it is right now.
Mhm.
15 to 24% ISP. That leads to the near eligible. They may qualify for a grace year.
Mhm.
But if they're below 15% ISP, if the schools are below that, they're not going to be eligible. And the families must apply individually for the free lunch and free breakfast.
Mm.
That's really key. That's not the way that Hardin County sits overall. So if you look out at places like Colesburg,
Mhm.
you know,
Which is in Hardin
Youngers
County.
Creek, Oh yeah, and that's in my district. We're looking at folks. When I drive through there, I know, and I talk to people out there. Um, yeah, they really. That's going to be something as I go door to door that I'm going to really push because I don't want to see hungry kids. All right, so here's some more numbers. Again, if you're writing it down, let's think about it. The reimbursement formula. The current multiplier is 1.6 times that ISP. But President Captain Bone Spurs is proposing a cut to make it 1.3 times ISP. And he can do that without Congress.
Right.
Now, a lower multiplier equals less money for schools. So that higher multiplier of 1.6, where we're currently at, that's more money for schools for Eaton. But lower multiplier equals less money for schools, which equals harder for them to sustain free meals for all. So now let's go on to Hardin County right now, 2024 to 2025 school year. You know what? We're looking at those numbers, right? Of course, we're in the 25 to 26 school year, but we're still off that old CEP.
Right.
All schools participating in CEP. All students are receiving free breakfast and free lunch. Future eligibility depends on the ISP levels and the federal policy decisions. So now, so we'll go ahead and close out, we are last segment here, segment 8. Now, Councilwoman Owens, last question for you, okay? If there's one thing you want a parent, a grandparent, or a community member in Hardin County to do after listening to us in this episode, what is it?
Attend the school board meetings. That's where they can understand how this works when we talk about the formula of the total amount of people who can be eligible, which we're talking 25% now, and then the multiplier or the variable, as we call it, is 1.6. And if the president puts it down to 1.3, that means it's less money reimbursed to the schools so they can pay for the free lunch meal rate, because it is a rate because there's nothing free. But if you pay people their worth when they went to work, they wouldn't need this. So
Amen.
For people to understand, because I saw a comment about Teresa Morgan, bless her heart, as they call her Terry, and someone said in a response, "Oh, we can pay the superintendent, $229,000 or whatever her annual income is, but we can't pay the kids. We can't pay to feed the kids." And we're public figures, and we do get those kind of slings and arrows, but that could be a valid statement. I don't know. I don't live with her. I don't know her household. I don't know how she would feel about that. And it's not always one for the other. It's not a tit for tat, or someone donates their income and that's supposed to make it. It isn't. Policy is still there.
Yep.
And her money is totally separate from Department of Agriculture, because the agriculture, that's not that's appropriating and makes her income as a superintendent.
Right.
So, it's a purple and green money and whatnot. So it sounds easy, but it's not. So I said people need to come to the city council, not just the city council meetings. We don't talk about school because that's not in our wheelhouse, different funding. So they should come to the school board meetings so they can understand how this impacts rolls out. And maybe if enough of them come, they might get a change. I don't know.
Hey, quite a few went when it was during COVID and they wanted to complain about masks. I think it's now time to, make this is just as important as
they rallied up on that one. Yeah.
So let's rally up. If we could rally up for that, please rally up for kids' empty stomachs and growling stomachs.
Right. They rallied up on that one. So show up.
Yeah. So, that's powerful. And I really want to thank you so much for just being here, taking this time. I know, it's late, but helping us understand something that affects thousands of kids right here in our community. Remember, thousands.
It's complicated. It really is complicated.
Man.
The formulas that people don't see behind the system. They still think, Claudine, the single mom with 5, 6, 7 kids and want a man in the house. But if she does, she lose the income. This is kind of similar. It's like you got to be low enough income. You have to verify that you're low income in order to get the subsidy that people think you're already getting a handout. But if you're not at a job where you can make the money, where you don't need the subsidy, it's again, does it create dependency? Does it add to the stigma? Does it really close the nutrition gap and all the other isms that we put on there? But I truly think if we paid some people, now there'll be people who make money and they still won't they still won't get the food. But this is going to hurt some people. It always does. Policy. That's why I'm getting my doctorate at Liberty University in public administration. My master's is in that too. My other master's is in elementary education, and my bachelor's is in biology. And it's always been about children and the well-being of a community. Kids are, they're in receipt of things. They don't always have the voice to challenge things, and so they become cannon fodder for a lot of things. But if family members went, they don't have to go to everyone, but if they just went, even the ones who don't have children, because I always say you can't talk about what you don't know, not smartly anyway. So go every so often just to get an idea and find out that the school has to pay its utility bill. And you go, oh,
Absolutely.
we got utilities. Yeah, we got utilities. Or the school is being built. I will see that on social media and someone says, hey, what's that being built over there off of 313, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's another school. It's another
Exactly.
school. So I just want people to be a little bit more thoughtful in these things and intent in their movement. Go to the school board meeting on West Jenkins Road, right up 31W Dixie, right across the street from Bluegrass Middle School. You got John Hardin right next to it, and then the elementary school, Heartland, that's there. Go there every so often. Let that be your bingo night. Make it your date night. Go to a school board meeting once a quarter.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for everyone listening, if your child goes to school in Hardin County, visit the district website at hardin.kyschools.us. Fill out that meal participation form and stay informed. As the Colonel's saying, the policies are in flux, but the kids sitting in those cafeterias, they are not. They're real people. Now we'll have some ability for you to go back, of course, rewind this if you want to find, see what we're talking about here. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But, share this episode with a parent, share it with a teacher, share it with your school board representative. This is too important to get lost in all the noise.
You're right. My school board representative is Mark Casey. We have a relationship. And so I can't just leave it all on his shoulder and say, fix it. Just fix it. I'm gonna call you tomorrow. Just fix it. It doesn't work that way. Or only worry about my street, my kids. And I don't have any kids in school, but they're all my kids. But I know some people can get tunnel vision, not intentionally, but if things are working okay for their kids, whoever their kids are, they don't think about anything else. And it goes back to the empathy. Doesn't mean you're a punk, doesn't mean you just open up your chest and give all that you have no matter what, but to really think about the person on left and right of you. If you were in their place, or if you were with me the time that I was in the dumpster behind Walmart where I got my 2 tick bites a couple of years ago, and I've had ticks before, it just, didn't rock me. But I was thinking, here's this veteran. It was like, hey, he was like, you gonna get in this trash can with me, or you gonna talk about saving me? Because right now, there's a loaf of bread in there, some croissants that hadn't fallen out of the plastic container. There's a bag of apples in there, and I'm going to get that. He had his backpack, and what did I do? I was in a dumpster, and I could have just rolled off and said, sir, airborne, do what you need to do. Great. But I did.
Well, my last quick question for you, and I know it's a little off topic. Hopefully people will forgive me. My brother, when he lost his leg and hand in Afghanistan, he was treated at Walter Reed. I can't remember if we've talked about this offline before, but what year were you there?
I was there from 97 into 99. So I was coming out of Bosnia and company command at Fort Hood. And I was the brigade S1, or the HR officer, from 97 to 98. And then I became the brigade XO from 98 to 99. And I tell you, the National Capital Region is a beast. And I
Yep.
changed that command with Karen Wagner, Lieutenant Colonel Karen Wagner. And when she went to the Pentagon G1, which is where I went years later, she was one of my Medical Service Corps buddies that died in the 9/11 attack with Lieutenant General Timothy Maude, which is why the Army Human Resources Command is named after the Timothy Maude complex.
Man, well, I think I told you I was on deployment with the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit,
Yep.
Special Operations Capable, when the attack happened. So I was with the first, Marines to go in to Pakistan, Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
But my brother, when he, some years later, lost his leg and hand in Afghanistan, he was stationed with the Big Red One out of
Yep.
Fort Hood.
Fort Hood, right.
both-
So when
both-
was he in Afghanistan?
So he was in, I was in there initially, and then he was in there, let's see, I will say 07, 08, and then, he passed away in 2014. But both little brothers were in there together. They had different last names because our youngest brother, his last name is Kellogg.
Mhm.
So we had, my brother that got blown up. He had been a Marine first, came back to Kentucky, went to Morehead State University to get a social work degree, about a
Right.
4-year degree. Then went back in some years later as a combat medic. And
I used to be
when
one of
our-
those.
yeah, you told me that. And so
Yeah.
when our youngest brother graduated from Morehead State University,
Mhm.
I insisted that he not go enlisted because the Army tried to get him to, and he wanted to go in the military.
Mhm.
I made the mistake of not letting him, as a bigger
Mhm.
brother, become a
Mhm.
chief warrant officer. He wanted to be a pilot. I should have.
Yeah.
He still holds
Yeah.
that against me, but he instead, got his commission as a signal corps officer.
Oh yeah.
So different last name, two brothers, same unit. He got to see, Sergeant Keck, later Staff Sergeant Keck, come off the
Okay.
medevac, still smoldering, and as he
Yep.
said, half his body looked like a Texas brisket from the IED blast that took off his leg and hand. So
I truly I understand it. I was there 9 and 10. I saw Pakistan when I was out in Asadabad, I believe it was, and I can see the East Corridor, the drug corridor, and the 7th group was at Camp Montron in Bagram, and I spent a little time with them in life and time of special forces and how they are. But I did J3 stuff a little bit versus my G1. So I did my operator side. So I moved around a lot. And as I tell people, they're probably tired of hearing about it. But my Chinook got shot at that I was in, and my MRAM got RPG'd 4 times. And even the minefield in Bosnia, it will shape you. And so
Oh,
as we
yeah.
talk about these races, I'm glad ours is nonpartisan, but even if it wasn't, I'm still on that, protect the nation mind frame. It's not who's on the left and who's on the right, but also listen to who's on the left and who's on the right, the back, center, and forward, because you got to be an informed leader and you got to hear not just one voice, kind of like, the CP. You can't just slash and burn and only stay in one category and say, oh, Logan, and they can get the meal or they can't, have and have not. And so Afghanistan will rock you like Iraq and any other places, whether it's the Sudan, Honduras, Wiesbaden. I mean, we got about 183 hot spots. People don't even know where they are. We never leave. We always sustain. We never leave. We always sustain in some form, partnership, collaboration, World Health Organization. Somewhere we never leave.
I'm still pissed because, like I said, I was the first Marines in, to Pakistan and Afghanistan, and we could have done it then, but no, we decided to get off track and go to Iraq. As soon as I got back, that's what they were talking about, and spin up for. But
I remember the Marines coming in the Helmand Providence. I remember that. Remember, I told you I had to do a real casualty estimate on how many people we were going to lose. Yeah, based on Marines. Yeah. And
I just, man, I really appreciate so much every single veteran we have in this county and every active duty. And I'm really proud, just like you are, to live here, be here, And I'm saying, right now, our situation in America, it's not left versus right. It's not even
Right.
Democrat versus
It's
Republican.
not.
We've got to have justice for all of us. And that's what we
Yes,
need to look at. And that's even what this discussion of
it
kids'
is.
lunches is.
It is.
It's justice for us
Mm-hmm.
all to be able to eat. You know
Mm-hmm.
that when they after World War II,
Mm-hmm.
they looked at a lot of the folks who wanted to join and ran down the office to try to join,
Mm-hmm.
not even be drafted, but they
Right.
couldn't because places, like Eastern Kentucky, where I'm from in Appalachia, and even all over Kentucky,
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of nutrition lacking, and folks just
Yes.
weren't, their bodies weren't up to it. People
You're right.
had cavities, they didn't have teeth because there was no fluoride in the toothpaste or in the water. That's why we
Mm-hmm.
started
Mm-hmm.
introducing it so that
Mm-hmm.
people would have their teeth, in
Right.
shape to defend the nation if they so wanted to ever, if the moment you call. And
Mm-hmm.
do we say, oh, no, you need to pay for your own fluoride? No, come on. No, that's why
We could
not.
get to
Why?
that. We might
Uh,
get to
yeah.
that.
Well, it's like we all have to realize we're in it together.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that we're all Lone Ranger, or John Wayne running the prairie all by ourselves, that's ludicrous.
Right.
Everybody needs an
Speaking English.
outpost.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
everybody needs some place to go supply up, and it takes us all working together to do that.
It
And
does.
I really, hope that's what we'll realize. Kids deserve to eat. You don't, maybe you didn't, people listening, maybe you didn't grow up dirt poor. And, like I said, I saw Shangri-La from age 0 to 4. And then
Mm-hmm.
from 4 to 18, I just saw sheer terror and
Mm-hmm.
starvation. I know what
Mm-hmm.
a lot of my kids have been through, and I don't want to
Right.
see that, anyone else have to go through that. So,
Right.
Hey, bless you. And I hope your campaign, is going well. Thank you for
It
the
is.
work that you continue to do after you retired, your service that you kept on going for. And hopefully
Yeah.
folks will maybe like and subscribe to this channel. Maybe go look over at your Facebook page and,
Mm-hmm.
what you've been talking about, posting your plans, because I'm loving what I'm seeing and hearing. And I hope everybody else can, say the same.
Yeah.
Realize
Yeah.
you're still serving.
It's right. I mean, I could have just sat down, in 2017
Yeah.
September, or not volunteered in every state, every country that I had time to do it in, or left my husband and daughter, my husband Raymond and my daughter Courtney, here a couple of times without me. And when they did well here in Radcliffe, I said, this is home, instead of going back to Newport News or Hampton, Virginia, with my parents and my high school buds and college. I said, this is home. I said, this city has wrapped their arms around my husband and daughter in my absence more than once. This is where I need to be. This is where I need to continue to serve. I have the leadership backbone for it and the experience for it. I have a great relationship with Knox because I still do things there. They're the other city. And I like supporting the other governments of the other, blue or red. I do recognize that it exists. It is what we have. But I'm more of a universal soldier, if you will, a universal mom. I'm a big sister. My brother's about 6 years younger than I am. And my parents are both military, Marine, and Army Reserve nurse, but that's not all that makes us who we are. I know some people think that, we just eat and live and breathe, because I wear my hat a lot. Sometimes I wear it for protection, majority of the time. But
Yeah.
I'm proud to have come through it. There were 3 times where it might not have been that way. And as I tell people, when things were happening, I thought to myself, does my husband know where the admin box is? And I was serious about that. I said, because that's where the will and all this other stuff is. And I said, he's going to have to do that. So
Right.
I protect this community, try to help the people that do it, and bring a little reality. People think we can do a lot. And during the campaign season, everybody wants to have a strategic plan, but really there's already a plan that's attributed to the budget. So you can only do certain things. But we just have to prioritize and hopefully keep people engaged and get them out. Come to the city council meeting, come to the fiscal court meetings, and it doesn't have to be just, our city. They can go to other cities. It's open to the public. Go to the school board meeting, like I said, once or twice a week. Hell, go to the skating rink and see what's going on over there, because we only have one. And so the more you know, the better you do. I mean, it sounds cheesy, but it really is. It can't be, oh, when I knock on doors and people say, oh, well, what are you going to do for me? I said, no, this is a we thing. It really is, because I can't cut your grass for you, and my code enforcement person can't run through and just keep everybody on even keel. People have to do some things too. And together, we can make some things happen. It doesn't have to be huge, but we can do some things. I don't want to build fiscal bridges if my people are crumbling under it just to say, ooh, look what I did. Look at this meme. And we got the bushes and the trees. But my students are suffering. Their parents and grandparents, which I see them in family court because I'm in CASA. I was there this morning. They're not enamored about your sign, about your promises. They're talking about right now. Can we feed the children right now? Can we get their IEPs done right now? Who's buying shoes right now? And no candidate can promise someone's household is going to flip overnight after the campaign is done. It's not realistic. It's not even feasible.
Absolutely. But we can advocate. We can do everything humanly possible, to facilitate.
Advocate, facilitate, have empathy, and be a leader. It's not about popularity. You're really out there and you're taking care of everybody, not just people who look like you, go to your church, tell you what you want to hear, or congeal with you when they need you. When they don't, they discard you and just wave at you across the street. This is real life stuff right here. And you and I have had to take care of people from all places, all backgrounds. We didn't pick and choose who we looked after. And every time we did it, we didn't know who we were going to get to do it again. And that's how I attack it here. Is not being overly aggressive. It's not being over, military. It's just we've learned how to take care of people. We've learned how to buy water, rock, sign for buildings, get zip codes. We know about infrastructure.
Yes,
we do.
That's key. And this is, the kids eating is part of infrastructure. It might not seem like it, but it really is.
But
food and food supplies is a crucial infrastructure.
It is.
And we can't let it deteriorate. We let bridges fall down.
Right.
And we shouldn't.
Right.
And we can't let, kids' hunger fall down. Well, we just watch it and laugh. Say, oh, it's your parents' fault.
Right.
No.
They should just pull themselves up. I did. As some people will say, I did. Okay.
Yeah. Well, behind every I did, there was help, whether they want to admit it or not.
That's a t-shirt right there. Behind every I did. I like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
T-shirt.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to remind everyone every night that, again, we're both running for office. I'm running for magistrate, District 3.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Our councilwoman, Colonel. I prefer to give to me that's your big title. She's running for mayor in Radcliffe, and y'all, we just got to live up to Kentucky's motto.
We do.
United we stand, divided we fall, and we got to remember we really are our brother's keeper and our sister's keeper. And if we truly love our neighbors as much as we love ourselves, we're not going to let their kids starve, and we're not going to be divided, and then therefore we're not going to fall. Right. So y'all, let's remember everyone deployed overseas tonight, because they're trying to defend what we're talking about.
They are.
And bless your corazón. That's a little old Spanish word for heart.
Heart. Yep.
And take this week, this hump day, and let's make it great. It's in our hands. So thank you so much for being on here with us tonight. And hopefully I can get you back on here again.
Anytime.
And I'll let the doggies run around and take us off here, okay?
Okay.
Woo-hoo.